Prologue. I've always dated men. It made sense. It was expected. I didn't think much beyond that. But I stopped believing in grand loves a long time ago. They sound poetic until you're the one left cleaning up the wreckage. A house half built, a vineyard half dead, and a man long gone. So I stick to what I can manage. Winemaking, soil, barrels, predictable seasons. No risks, no surprises. Then she showed up, and suddenly, nothing felt safe anymore. Chapter 1. It was 6 a.m. The light had turned Lake Naivasha to glass. From the ridge, I could see everything. The grapevines, the thin silver thread of irrigation pipes that carried what little water we had left. Naivasha mornings used to mean mist and the sound of ibis. Now, it was mostly silence, and the low cough of the diesel pump fighting for breath. People like to say winemaking is romantic, that it's sun-warmed grapes, laughter in the fields, and the kind of patience that makes beauty out of time. It isn't. It's discipline and repetition. I walked between the rows with my clipboard, checking the grape clusters. The season had been dry, the berries smaller, tough-skinned, like everything this year. Curia, my foreman, jogged up the slope, his boots dusted in white volcanic soil. "The new pickers are arriving by noon," he said. "But there's one extra. A last-minute addition." I nodded. "As long as they can work." He hesitated. "This one's different. Not local." I didn't ask, just nodded. Seasonal labor was unpredictable. You took whoever showed up. I looked east, over the acacias. The vines shimmered in the morning half-light, still stubbornly green. The loan officer was due next week, yet my tanks were still half empty. And somewhere in Nairobi, a developer was waiting to swoop in on my failure. I pressed my thumb against a grape, watching juice bead at the skin's edge. Still sharp. Not ready yet. And neither was I. Chapter 2. The new worker arrived late, just as I was checking the pump. She came in a swirl of dust and apology, a faded truck, a camera slung across her chest, a smile too easy for the hour. "Salma Ferguson," she said, hopping out before the engine stopped. "Sorry, I got turned around at the flower farms. You must be Blake." I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag. "You're 2 hours behind schedule." "Then I'm early for tomorrow," she quipped, grinning. She was sun-browned, light-footed, wearing jeans with more stories than fabric. Her hair was tied up in a careless knot that kept falling loose whenever she moved. She smelled like sandalwood and coffee. "Photography," I said, eyeing the camera. "Not part of your job description." "It's how I see things," she replied. "Don't worry, I'm better with a camera than a shovel." "That's what worries me," I said. She laughed, unbothered. "It's beautiful here. The light feels deliberate." Around us, the vineyard spread in soft lines toward the lake. The wind stirred the nets. A few petals drifted. "It feels like it takes its time breathing," she added. "Not during harvest," I said. "Around here, we don't breathe until the harvest is done." Salma tilted her head, studying me the way photographers do, as if she were testing exposure. "You talk like someone who doesn't trust the weather." "I don't," I said. "Or people," I added, giving her a pointed look. The workers began gathering near the lower rows, laughter rising in snatches. I handed Salma a pair of gloves and pruning shears. "You'll be with Curia's team," I said. "Stay focused. The vines bruise easily." "Got it." "Handle with care," she responded. Something in her tone, light, teasing, made me glance up. Her eyes were the color of wet soil after rain, bright even in shadow. Normally, farm workers came in the morning and left at sunset, but Salma requested to stay on the farm. Something about needing to catch the first light on the vineyard. I told her she could have the spare bunk in the old supply wing. Less driving, fewer excuses and lateness. I thought it would make things simpler. It didn't. She worked faster than I expected, moving easily among the vines, sometimes humming under her breath. Every so often she'd pause, lift her camera, and capture something. From hands sorting grapes, sunlight through nets, to the slant of shadows across the rows. By noon, the heat pressed down like a weight. I found her by the pump again, squatting beside the pipe with Curia. The engine was coughing, sputtering like a dying animal. "It's the valve," I said. "We'll need a mechanic." But Salma was already unscrewing a coupling with her multi-tool. "Maybe not. Looks like a blockage." "You're not an engineer." "Neither are you," she said, smiling without looking up. I watched as she cleared a clump of silt, tightened the valve, and hit the starter. The pump roared back to life, water rushing through the lines. The sound filled the air, relief in motion. Curia laughed. "You've just saved us a day's delay." Salma stood, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Just luck." I shook my head. Luck doesn't fix pipes. She met my gaze, a flicker of something unreadable passing between us. Not triumph, something quieter. "I like things that work again," she said softly. "Even for a while." Later, as the workers packed up, I caught her aiming her lens toward me. I frowned. "Don't." She lowered it. "Sorry, you looked like the vines do, rooted." I didn't know what to say to that. When she turned away, I found myself still watching. The way her hair caught the light, the curve of her back as she leaned on the fence, the faint dust smudge on her cheek. I told myself it was irritation. She was new, careless, distracting. But that night, when the generator hummed and the lake glimmered dark beyond the window, I caught myself replaying her voice, light, unafraid, and wondered why it lingered. Somewhere out there, the pump kept breathing steadily, water moving through the dark earth. Calm. For the first time in months, so was I. But as I would soon learn, that was the calm before the storm. Chapter 3. By mid-month, drought loomed. The wind carried dust instead of rain. Every morning, the vines looked a little more tired. The soil cracked in places it never used to. Even the air felt brittle. Curia came to me one morning, hat in hand. "The workers are nervous," he said. "If the water runs dry before the last pick?" "It won't," I said. He hesitated. "The Lake Management Committee says the lake is lower than last year. That maybe we should cease irrigation early." I crossed my arms. "We don't stop. Not until it's done. The weather will behave." He gave me a look that said he'd stopped believing the weather, and perhaps in me too. That afternoon, I caught Salma taking photos again, crouched between the rows, camera poised like she was praying. The light slid gold across the leaves, catching her in half shadow. For a second, she looked like she belonged here more than I did. "You'll spook the pickers," I said. She didn't look up. I already asked them. They wanted to see the pictures after. "You're supposed to be sorting grapes." She glanced at me. "Don't worry, I have it handled." I told myself it was just the heat making my pulse quicken. It had nothing to do with the way she leaned in, or her sandalwood scent. Just heat, just exhaustion. Nothing else. Later, I went to the workers' quarters to fetch a spare coil of twine. My storage shed had long filled up, so I'd started keeping the extra supplies in the old bunkhouse, the one Salma had claimed. I'd always told myself I didn't care for her photography. On my way to the bunkhouse, I told myself I'd be quick, just grab what I needed and leave. But then, I spotted her camera bag on her bed. Its lens caps scattered nearby, the smell of dust and ferment clinging to everything. And then I saw them. A few photos, taped above the bunk, their corners curling with heat. They depicted hand-stained purple, baskets overflowing, vines bowed in evening light. It wasn't sentimental, just honest. Even exhaustion looked beautiful through her lens. One photo stopped me in my tracks. It was of the lake at dusk, reflections trembling like breath, my silhouette in the corner. Beneath it, in pen, were the words, lonely, but alive. Something in me went quiet. I should have felt angry, exposed. Instead, I felt seen, and that frightened me more. I gathered the twine and turned to leave, only to nearly collide with Selma at the door. I said nothing. Neither did she. That evening she found me near the tanks, watching the temperature gauges. The air was sharp with ferment, yeasty, alive. "I didn't mean to overstep," she said quietly. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I know you looked at the photos." "Did I?" She smiled faintly. "You strike me as someone who doesn't do anything by accident." I didn't answer. The hum of the tanks filled the silence, a steady heartbeat in stainless steel. Salma moved closer, her tone gentler. "It's a hard year, isn't it? Every year's hard." "Yeah, but this one looks like it's fighting you back." I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. "The vines are stubborn," I said. "So's their keeper." She stepped beside me, shoulder almost brushing mine, and for a heartbeat, the noise of the cellar fell away. The air thickened with warmth and ferment, and something else I didn't want to name. Then she said it, soft, like she wasn't sure she should. "I called that picture lonely but alive, because that's what the vineyard feels like. And maybe—" She stopped there. I finished it for her, barely above a whisper. "Maybe that's what I am too." She didn't speak again, and I didn't move. The moment just hung there, fragile as grape skin, one breath from breaking. Chapter 4. Fermentation nights blurred together. Long hours, sour air, the sound of pumps and dripping hoses. The cellar was an oven of scent, crushed fruit, yeast, and steel. Selma worked beside me, sleeves rolled, hair pulled back tight. Sometimes she hummed to the rhythm of the bubbling tanks, off-key but soft. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. One evening, with the temperature climbing, I stripped off my gloves and checked the readings again. "If this keeps up, we'll lose batch 3, I muttered. Salma leaned against the tank. "You always talk like the grapes can hear you." "They can," I said. "They just never listen," she laughed under her breath. "You ever think about leaving this place?" "No," I said with certainty. "Never? The vines wouldn't forgive me." I smirked. Selma studied me. Or maybe she was looking past me. "You say that like they own you." "Maybe they do," I say. She nodded slowly. "I get that. I never stay anywhere long enough to belong." "That sounds convenient," I said, an edge to my voice. Her lips twitched. "You say that like it's a crime. It's a luxury. Being able to abandon everything on a whim," I said, the words bitter. "I call it survival." She responded. The silence that followed wasn't cold, just tight, like something about to unravel. The temperature gauge beeped. I turned it down too sharply, cursing under my breath. Salma reached past me, her fingers brushing my wrist as she steadied the knob. The touch was brief, accidental, but my pulse betrayed me anyway. "Sorry," she said softly. "Don't be," she smiled, half tired, half something else. "You ever let anyone help you, Blake?" "I just did," I said. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. The tanks hissed softly between us. The air was warm, alive, and full of things we hadn't yet said. Chapter 5. The night it happened, the power went out. We were in the cellar, running on fumes and caffeine, when the hum of the pump stopped. The lights flickered once, then died, leaving us in syrup-thick darkness. Only the sound of bubbling ferment remained, steady, alive, indifferent. "Great," I muttered. "Just what we need." Another blackout. Selma's voice came from somewhere near the tanks. "You keep candles around here?" I found the lanterns and struck one alight. The flame threw uneven light across the barrels. Long shadows, gold and black. Selma stood beside the nearest tank, arms folded, her grin small but unmistakably there. "Looks like a horror movie," she said. "You're the serious scientist. I'm the reckless intern. One of us won't make it out alive," I snorted. "You'd talk the villain to death. Or charm them into letting me go." She quipped. Her voice was teasing, but the words hit somewhere they shouldn't have. I turned to check the valves, anything to keep busy. She followed me, the lantern swinging between us, painting her face in soft, warm light. It made her eyes look like something molten. "You always this calm when everything stops working?" she asked in quiet voice. "I've learned that panic doesn't restart machinery." Her silence filled the space between us, quiet but close. I heard her shift her weight, the rustle of her sleeve. Then she laughed softly. "You have no idea how intense you look right now." I turned. "Intense?" "Yeah, like if someone touched you wrong, you'd either break or bite." She continued in that quiet tone. I should have laughed it off. Instead, I met her gaze and the room went still. Lantern light flickered against her skin. The pulse in my throat was too loud. She took a small step forward, not enough to touch, just enough to be inside my breath. "You ever stop thinking?" she whispered, eyes searching mine. "Not if I can help it." I husked. Her hand found my jaw, light as a question. I felt the warmth of her fingers before thoughts even formed, my pulse erratic against her thumb. "Salma." I started, but it came out rough, useless. She didn't move closer, just stayed there, eyes on mine, waiting. The silence stretched. Then something, instinct, exhaustion, want, tipped the balance. It wasn't supposed to happen, not with her, not with anyone. But my body moved before sense could stop it, like the vines reaching for rain. I'm not sure who leaned in first. All I recall is her softness. The kiss was hesitant, disbelieving, all heat and restraint fighting for the same space. Her pliant mouth tasted like a warm promise, sweetness and something terrifyingly alive. When I finally pulled back, my breath shook. "This isn't, I stuttered. Salma's hand fell away slowly. She stepped back, careful not to look hurt. "It's okay," she said softly. "You don't have to explain." She turned and left the cellar for the bunkhouse before I could see her face. I turned off the lantern and headed for my house, letting darkness swallow what remained unsaid. Chapter 6. The next morning. The cellar felt colder. I buried myself in work, checking tanks, counting crates, talking too sharply to anyone who came near. Even Curia kept his distance. The workers whispered. Nothing direct, but the air carried tension like static. Selma stayed out of my way. When she passed me a clipboard, our hands didn't touch. When I asked her to haul barrels, she did it without a word. Only once did I catch her watching me, camera in hand, eyes unreadable, and I looked away first. I told myself that kiss meant nothing, that I was tired, lonely, drunk on harvest air, but every lie tasted of her. That night, I heard the camera shutter again. Somewhere near the vines, the faint click of her lens against the hum of insects. By then, she'd stopped showing me the photos. A few days later, I saw her in the office, typing with restless focus. She didn't notice me at first. When she did, she minimized the screen. "Writing?" I asked. "Just notes. For myself." "Good." I forced a neutral tone. "Keep it that way." She flinched, then nodded. "Sure." I didn't mean to be cruel, but cruelty felt easier than confusion. Some nights I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake, thinking of that half second between the spark and the pull, the look in her eyes after, the way she didn't push, didn't demand, just stayed present. I told myself the kiss didn't mean anything, that it was a mistake, a lapse, a thing I'd imagined. But every time I closed my eyes, I felt her hand again, ghost light on my neck, my jaw. Worse still, my mouth still remembered hers, and my heart refused to fall in line. Meanwhile, the drought tightened its grip. 2 workers quit. The tanks ran low. And Salma started writing more often, spending all her free time on her laptop under the acacia by the gate. One afternoon, her phone buzzed loud enough for me to hear. "Naomi, hey," she said, voice brightening. "Yeah, I think I've found something special here. Not just pretty pictures. It's real. It's worth telling." I walked away before I heard the rest. Chapter 7. It happened 3 days later. Curia found me pruning near the gate. "Madam," he said, tone cautious. "Someone posted an article about the vineyard online. They say a foreigner wrote it. I didn't understand until he handed me his phone. The headline read, "Holding Ground, a woman's fight to keep Naivasha's vines alive." Salma's byline stared back at me. I read in silence, her words careful, beautiful, too honest. She'd described the drought, the failing pumps, the taste of dust in the wine. She'd quoted me, lines I didn't remember saying aloud. "You can't control what grows. You can only try not to lose it." And the photos, my hands on the vines, my shadow against the dusk, vulnerable, exposed. By noon, calls started coming in. Old buyers asking questions, strangers offering help, investors sniffing for failure before the fruit was even bottled. The workers whispered again, not about quitting this time, but about pity. And I detested it all. When I saw her by the tanks later, I didn't hesitate. "So you came here looking for content for your feature?" I asked, voice harsh. "Or was I just someone you could mock and make fun of?" She blinked. "What?" "You needed a story. Turns out I fit the picture." I snapped. Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair. Neither is exposure." My voice shook. "You took what wasn't yours and exposed it." "I wanted people to see how hard you fight," she said, eyes bright with something between anger and regret. I thought that mattered. "It's not your fight to tell," I persisted. "Then why did you let me see it?" She countered. That stopped me. Because somewhere between control and collapse, I'd let her see too much. But I didn't say that. I turned away. "Pack your things," I said. "Out of here. By sundown." She stared at me, tears sharp behind her eyes, but held back. "You're not angry because I wrote it. You're angry because it was true," she said. And then she left, walking through the heat, dust rising behind her, camera swinging uselessly at her side. I didn't call her back. Chapter 8. The vineyard went quiet after she left. No music, no laughter, just the wind scraping over the vines. For the first time in years, I didn't want to walk the rows. Every leaf looked like reproach. The grapes were nearly ready, but the soil was powder. The irrigation tanks coughed more air than water. Even Kuria stopped offering reassurances. He just worked in silence, same as me. At night, the lights from Lake Naivasha flickered in the distance. Boats drifting, fishermen's lanterns glinting like hope refusing to die. I used to find it comforting. Now it looked like everything I'd never reached for. Salma's absence sat in the air like unbottled wine. Half-fermented. Volatile. Impossible to forget. 3 days later, the storm came. It started with wind. A sharp, desperate gust that lifted dust and leaves in spirals. Then came the sky, turning that strange greenish black that means something's about to give. Kuria ran to secure the barrels, yelling for help. The younger workers bolted for the sheds. I was halfway down the slope when the first drops hit. Fat, heavy, like they'd been waiting months to fall. Within minutes, rain pelted the earth hard enough to bruise it. Good, I thought. Let it come. Then I heard the crack, a metallic groan from below. The drainage pipe by the old cellar burst, sending water rushing toward the storage barrels. The runoff from the hill was too strong. It tore through the soft earth, dragging leaves and debris into the lower trench. Damn it! I ran, slipping in the mud, rain blinding. The cellar door had already blown open. Water pooled around the barrels, sloshing toward the racks. I grabbed the pump handle, but the motor had flooded. The whole place smelled like panic and thirsty, rain-soaked earth. And then, over the storm, a voice I hadn't expected to hear again. "Move!" Salma, soaked through, hair plastered to her face. She waded in without hesitation, pulling at the sandbags that hadn't held. "What are you doing here?" I shouted. "Apparently saving your stubborn ass," she yelled back, half laughing, half breathless. We worked side by side, no time to think. She hauled the smaller barrels up onto the higher racks. I cleared the drains. Every few minutes I would catch her face, dirt-streaked, determined. I couldn't look too long without something in my chest twisting painfully. By the time the rain began to ease, we were both covered in mud and sweat, standing in ankle-deep water that smelled faintly of crushed fruit and exhaustion. But the barrels, the wine, were safe. Salma leaned against the door frame, laughing weakly. Still think the vines are worth everything, huh? I met her eyes. Well, she shook her head, rainwater dripping from her chin. You could have called for help. You left. Yeah, she said softly. I did, you told me to. But I came back. When the thunder finally rolled away into the hills, the world felt newly scrubbed. The vines glistened anew. Steam rose from the wet soil, and the lake shimmered again. We walked the rows in silence, boots squelching in the mud. The air smelled of wet leaves and second chances. Finally, I asked, "Why did you come back, Selma?" She stopped, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Because I couldn't stand leaving things like that. Because you didn't deserve to be alone in this mess. And because, her voice faltered, because I missed you. I wanted to tell her to leave, to save myself the trouble. But the words tangled somewhere between my throat and my heart. All that came out was her name. Soft, unguarded, true. She looked down at her hands. I thought if I could just tell your story right, it would mean something. I didn't realize I was trying to belong in it, she said, voice tender. The truth of it was so simple, it hurt. I stepped closer. You hurt me. I know, she said, voice soft. But I also hurt you, I added. Yeah, she agreed quietly. You did. A bird shrieked somewhere above us, the sound splitting the air like release. Salma glanced toward the lake. I'm supposed to leave for Nairobi tomorrow. I don't even know why I stayed this long, but I couldn't just drive away knowing you were... She gestured helplessly. Still here, I finished for her. Still here, she echoed. Still trying to fix everything alone. I exhaled slowly, watching the sky lighten over the hills. Maybe I don't know how to stop. Then let me help, she said simply. No cameras, no stories, just me. We ended up back in the cellar to check the damage. The storm had left everything smelling raw. Damp oak, earth, metal. I bent to inspect one of the lower barrels. She crouched beside me, our shoulders brushed. Neither of us moved away. When I looked up, she was already watching me. Steady, patient, not daring, but not afraid either. This is crazy, I murmured. Probably, she said, and smiled. But you can't make good wine without a little madness, can you? I laughed, the sound foreign in my own mouth. Her expression softened. I kept thinking about that night, she said. The lanterns. The look on your face when you almost let yourself want something. Almost? She reached out, fingers hesitating an inch from mine. You stopped halfway. And if I don't stop this time? I said, stepping closer to her, eyes glued to her lips. Salma's breath caught. Then I'd finally know what it feels like to stay. I didn't give myself time to think. The kiss this time wasn't hesitant. It was rain-soaked, desperate, and certain. Her hands tangled in my hair. Mine pulled her closer, all the restraint of the past weeks collapsing into one sharp, beautiful surrender. It wasn't about need anymore. It was about recognition. The quiet, shocking realization that I'd found something worth trusting again. When we finally broke apart, she laughed softly against my neck. You're shaking. So are you, she smiled. Guess the vines aren't the only ones learning to survive the weather. I nodded at her words. Maybe I never was what I said I was. Maybe all I ever needed was someone who made me stop pretending. She smiled, and I stopped running from the truth. Later, we sat outside the cellar doors, wrapped in an old blanket, watching the sunrise bleed over the valley. Steam lifted from the fields. The vineyard glowed, bruised, battered, but still standing. Salma leaned against me. You know, the magazine offered me a travel column. I told them I might be staying put for a while. I turned to her. You hate staying put. Maybe I just hadn't found the right reason. I didn't have words for that. So I reached for her hand instead. Small gesture, simple, but it felt like the start of something I didn't need to control. By midday, the workers were back, laughing about the storm, grateful for the rain. Kuria gave me a knowing look when he saw Selma beside me, but he said nothing. Some things didn't need explaining. As the sun climbed, we walked the rows again, checking for damage. The vines looked resilient, the leaves heavy, glistening. New shoots had pushed through the mud overnight. Salma brushed her fingertips over one. "You think they'll make it?" I nodded. "They always do. You just have to know when to hold on, and when to let go." She smiled, eyes bright with that unguarded warmth I'd once mistaken for recklessness. "And which am I?" I leaned in, kissed her again, slow, certain this time. Something I'm not letting go of. Epilogue. A month later, the harvest came in. Late, smaller, but rich. Salma stood by the press, camera slung but unused. "No pictures today?" I teased. She grinned. "Some moments don't need proof." We filled the first barrel together, the air fragrant with crushed fruit. The sound of the wine running into oak was low, rhythmic, alive. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "What do you think this one will taste like?" I smiled, heartier. "Late rain, too much heart." She laughed softly. "So complicated?" "Yeah," I whispered. "And worth keeping." Liked this? Every heartbeat in Africa tells a story. Subscribe to feel it.